color and brushes and how you can learn how to do this. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about brushes first. So, if you have a pack of these around, you do not want to use them. They are fine for some things. I keep them around because they're great for glue. They're great for any type of application where you're going to use it one time and throw it away. But it is not got a point on it, so it's not a good watercolor brush. So if you've got these, don't use them. You're much better off to just get one or two really good brushes. Even just one decent brush is better than a whole pack of these. Right. So if you're using Crayola or a lot of the other brands that you can get, and you're not going to pay a lot for these watercolors. They're going to cost you about anywhere from $1 at the dollar store to maybe $3 if you go to Walmart. And that little 9 pack, 8 pans, 8, 9 pans, somewhere around there. And we'll talk about what a pan is, but they're colors. And you can go and buy those, and it's going to be fine, absolutely fine for what we're doing. I'm going to show you my watercolor set. And guys, this is a little more expensive. I just didn't have my cheaper set at home today, so I had to use these. These are Winsor Newtons, okay? And if you really like to paint, you might like a set of Winsor Newtons. They come in all different types of colors. These are the pans here. So this little pan here can come in and out. Let's see if I can get one out. You can actually remove them, and you can then buy another set of colors and pop new ones in. And as you use these up, you can continue to buy. So you don't have to keep purchasing this little plastic thing every single time. So that's kind of a nice thing. But you're going to pay $30, $40 for this, which, I mean, I always watch my money. So what I do is go to Hobby Lobby when they have the 50% off or 40% off coupon, and I buy it then. So I'm going to get it for around $15. But like I said, I don't really recommend it unless you're really going to be into painting. I recommend you just go buy that one for $3 at Walmart or a little dollar pack at the dollar store. That's your best bet for what we need to do. Okay? Now, when you go and buy one, whether it's the dollar one or the Crayola or the Winsor Newton, when you open it up like this, you're going to see that there's these little sections here. Okay? This is where you're going to do your mixing. They all have them. They're called mixing trays. If you get a clear lid, take your mixing tray and put it on a white surface so you can actually see what you're mixing. So a lot of times you might be taking the color here off the pan, but hopefully see how mine is really dirty right here? Well, you can keep from getting that if you're mixing over here instead. You'll see that I mix or try to as much as I can in the pan, okay? But I do get lazy sometimes, and sometimes my watercolors get real dirty and I have to wipe them off. But all you have to do is get a little piece of paper towel, wet it down, and just wipe it, and it will come clean, and then you can use it, okay? Now, you noticed I pulled the white out. Guys, you're not supposed to use white with watercolor, okay? If you're doing something like we're going to be doing with our mixed media, yeah, you could put white with it. But traditional watercolor uses the paper for white, so you have to be very, very prepared when you start painting and make sure you don't put any paint on your white areas, okay? Either that or you have to mask them, and that's another lesson, all right? So that's my watercolor, okay? Now, this would be a brush that would just come with that $3 set of watercolor, the Crayolas. This came right out of a Crayola. Now, when you get it out, it may not have a point on it. You want to dip it in some water. Here's my water. I'm going to dip it, and I'm going to take it, and I'm going to put a point on it. I'm going to always do this. Every time I wash it, no matter what, before I put it away, I'm going to put a point on it every single time when I get ready to, I'm going to dry it like this first, okay? It's just going to lay down on my table flat. Once it's dry, I'm going to store it sitting up in a jar like this. Of course, not with the water in it, but I'm just going to store it. I have a ton of different glasses around, and I have all my brushes in it. So that's a good brush here. Now, this brush, which you can see is quite long, and it has a very heavy white bristle. This is not a good brush. This brush is for oil painting, or it's for acrylics. Now, you're going to be painting on a canvas if you're going to be using this brush. Our paper cannot stand up to a bristle brush. Do not use them. Take them and put them away. If you're in my art room, you're going to find that these brushes are there mixed in sometimes. You just want to stay away from a really stiff brush because the watercolor paper is just going to eat it up. Okay, so don't use that. We'll put that away because we're absolutely not going to use it. All right, so let's look at some other brushes. So traditionally, they come two ways. You have what's called a flat brush and a round brush. Okay, let me move this out of the way so it's easier for you to see. I'm going to put my paper back. Okay, so this is a flat brush. So, I mean, look at the way that it is put, the hairs are clamped to the brush itself. And see how flat that is? That's what makes it a flat brush. Now, sometimes this one has a chisel on it. Sometimes they are flat across the top. And I like the flat and I like the chiseled. It's all good. I would like, it's nice if you can have a medium one like this, just about the size that I have. I don't see the size on this one. I'm not sure what size it is, okay? But it's not a very big brush. I would say it's probably, I think it's about a 3. It is not big at all, okay? And then you have this brush. This brush is an 8. You can tell what size they are by looking here. But honestly, guys, you should be able to tell whether you want to use it or not by how big it is here, okay? So this would be good for a wash, okay? Where you want to cover a lot of area. And so this nicer, bigger brush, this 8, is what you would like to do with that. Now, I also have one here that is a 1. Now, this 1, you can look at it. It is tiny. I've never even used this brush before. Let me wet it down a little bit. So it's got stuff to make it really stiff on it right now. We're going to get rid of that. Put the point back on it. All right, so this brush is tiny. You're going to want to use this one for details and things like that. I'm not going to want to paint a big sheet of watercolor with this little tiny brush. It's going to take me forever, and I'm going to be crazy by the time I'm done. I want to use this one, or I even have really much, much bigger brushes, okay? So we're not going to ever paint very large. We're only going to paint little squares like this. So we won't really need a super large brush, all right? Then if you really want to get fancy, and I love these, they're good to have. They're not that expensive. This is a size 2, and this is a fan brush. And they're great for doing things like little pieces of grass and stuff like that, that it's a very specialized brush. But I wanted you to know that they have specialized brushes that you can use also. Okay, so we've talked about brushes. Let's move away from those. Let's talk about our water real quick. Now, when I'm using water, I'm going to use 2. Okay, I'm going to use 1 for cleaning and 1 for mixing. And I'm also going to clean my water. I'm not going to sit here and let my water turn black and then expect to go for a pink and expect it not to turn too dark, okay? You need to keep your water clean, but it will help you if you have 1 for washing your brushes and 1 for mixing and trying to keep them a little bit clean. Now, the other thing is I don't sit down to paint. If you've ever been in one of my classes and I've talked with you, I will tell you that I always have a piece of tissue. This is just a paper towel. I'm going to keep it, and 90% of the time, I'm going to paint with it in my hand, and I'm going to use it to keep my brush dry and things like that. I'm going to use it to sponge up places. There's a ton of things that I'm going to do with a paper towel. You need to have one if you're painting. Okay? Now, let's talk about paper real quick. And I wish you were here, but you're not, so you're just going to have to do the best you can. You're going to get paper from me. Okay? But if you get to where you like to watercolor, you're going to want to go buy some. When you go to buy, I would recommend you just go in to Hobby Lobby or Walmart and just get a pad, like a sketch pad, but instead of having drawing paper in it, it's going to have watercolor paper in it. I would recommend you just do that right now. You are not so far along, you need specialized paper. But when I go to the store, I get to pick from hundreds of papers. So let's say I'm going to Jerry's, okay? Artorama, I think is what it's called downtown. If I go down there, I'm going to have about 100 choices. And one of the things they're going to ask me is, do I want hot or cold press? Now, if it's a cold press, it's going to be real rough when I rub my hands over it, okay? If it's a hot press, it's going to be really smooth. I kind of like it in between. Sometimes I like a really rough one, but most of the time I'm going to use a cold press because a lot of times when I paint, I'm doing very detailed things, so I'm going to like having that cold press where I can really get in there and get all the little details in, okay? The other thing is you can buy it by weight. How many pieces of paper are in a ream, okay? So when you're buying it, if you're going to buy, you buy it by weight. If you buy 90 pounds, 90-pound paper, then you're going to have 90 sheets in a ream, okay? The paper that I buy for you guys is very reasonable. It's a student watercolor paper. I usually buy it from Blick Art Supplies, and it's going to cost me about 50 cents a sheet, which is not bad for watercolor, but watercolor does cost you a bit more. So be prepared when you go to the store and you're going to buy a pad of it, that it's not going to be super cheap. But again, I'm going to be providing you with paper this year, so you don't have to worry about buying paper unless you're interested in doing a lot of painting on your own. Okay, so let's start out, okay? Now, we're going to be just playing with line to start off with. And I'm going to just grab this brush because I feel like most of you will have this brush. If you go buy that Crayola one with the 8 pans, this is what you're going to get. So it's a good one to start with, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and wet down my brush in the, let's see if I can get that to come over. Yeah, trying to show you a lot at once. All right, so we're just going to do a line. So I'm going to pick a dark color, and I don't have any black here. A lot of artists don't use black. They will put two dark colors together to make black. And so mine doesn't have a black in it. I rarely ever paint with a black. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to mess around with it a little bit. Remember me telling you about this? I'm going to touch it here. Now let's talk about how a watercolor should look. It should be transparent. So if I have a pencil and I have wrote my name, we'll write it right here, Wyatt. Okay, if I write it, then when I put my watercolor over it, it should have, you should be able to see it through it. It's called translucent. You should be able to see through it. You do not paint it really thick. If you paint it really thick, then what's going to happen is it won't dry. There's gum arabic in here. That's what they use with chewing gum. And with ice cream, haven't you ever wondered how ice cream stays soft? Well, it's because they put gum arabic in it. And so it doesn't dry. If you use it really, really thick, it looks real pretty, but it's going to stay sticky. And then all the hairs in the room, all the dust and everything else is going to stick to it. It's going to stick to other pieces, and it's going to be really bad for you to try to use it. So you've got to use it transparent. If you don't like the way it is transparent, then you need to switch over to another medium like acrylic or oil. Okay? All right. So we're going to go on ahead and start. Did you notice when I made my line? Do you see how there's a little bubble of color right here? You should have that. You should always be pulling a little bubble of color with you. When you don't have that, then it's time to reload your brush. Okay? You're going to want to put some more watercolor on there. Of course, we're working in the mixing tray, and you're going to want to make sure that you work again. All right. So one of the things that we really want to learn to do is we want to learn how to make really thin lines, and we want to learn how to make thick lines. Okay? And we're going to start thin, and we're going to do a lot of thin lines, a lot of thick lines, and then we're going to go thin to thick. Okay? So if I'm going to make a thin line, I'm going to take my brush and I'm going to hold it almost straight up. Now, the more pressure you put on the pencil, the more thick the line's going to be. So I'm going to just barely touch it and drag it across, and I'm going to leave myself a very thin line. Notice that it's darker at the right end than the left end, and that's because I am dragging that watercolor. You practice till you can get a thin line, okay? Then to get a thicker line, you're going to put more pressure. So I'm going to put the pressure on my brush. I'm going to go halfway down. That is as thick a line as I can get, okay? I cannot get any thicker line than what I can get by putting the pressure halfway down. And of course, I'm always going to leave this little dot here because that's the watercolor I'm pulling with my brush, okay? Now, what about thick to thin? Well, thin to thick. I'm going to go way up on my little tippy toe brush, and then I'm going to push down until I can get nice and thick. Same thing here again. Up on my little tippy toe, and then I'm going to go to halfway. Okay? So once you get good at that and you're feeling pretty good about it, then my suggestion is you try to go into some curves. Okay? So let's do a curve. This is kind of a strange curve here, but I kind of like to teach it, where I put the brush halfway down. I go to the side, and then I pick up. So again, halfway down, go to the side, and I pick up. Whoops, didn't really pick up very good. All right, starting to get too dry brush. Okay, so let's play around with thick to thin and just some little curves. So I'm going to go thick to very, very thin. And guys, I kind of twirl my brush a little bit. And I am kind of rusty because I haven't done a lot of watercolor this summer. I will get better as I go. But this shows you how to go thick to thin with a curve. So I need you to practice that. I'm going to clean my brush now. I'm going to take my brush, and I'm not rubbing it across the bottom. And I am going in figure eights and around and around. Then I'm going to take and do this. And I want to do it till it is clean. Okay? Then we're going to do just like I said we would. We're going to put a point on our brush, just like this. And we're not going to stand it up until it is dry. And the reason being is because all of the water will run down into here, and the glue is in here. And that glue will get soft, and all your brush bristles will start to fall out. So we're going to just lay it flat on the table, let it dry, and as soon as it's dry, we're going to put it up. Okay? So you practice this, and then you see me for part 2, where I'm going to teach you some techniques.